Hey, this is Ricky Williams, and you're checking out Scoop B Radio.
Scoopy Radio on your area code, on the plane, on the train, everywhere you need to be. I am your host, Brandon Scoopy Robinson. Check out Scoopy Radio on all streaming platforms. The man, the myth, the legend, Ricky Williams joins us on Scoopy Radio. Brother, what's up?
Hey, what's up? Well, good to be here. Really good to be here.
Come on now. We went from that panel at Georgetown to doing an interview again. I am glad to have you here because I think that you were ahead of your time when you were labeled and you took in my opinion, your passion, your interests into big business.
Yeah. It's funny in a way. It's kind of like the American dream, or at least the way I understood it. And for me growing up, I thought once I made it as an athlete that I was free. That I was free to pursue anything that I wanted.
Yeah. Heisman Trophy winner, top NFL draftee. Is it harder to make it or is it harder to stay in the league?
It's harder to make it. Because once you get in, you have an opportunity to prove yourself. And I've seen guys decent talent level, but they had a work ethic and they found a coach that trusted them and believed in them, and they stayed in the league for over a decade. So I think, and the hardest part is to get there. But once you get there, you got an opportunity to find ways to stay there.
Who was your favorite coach when you were in the NFL?
I played 1 year for Nick Saban, and I really like Nick, because at least the way I played or the way I went about it is tell me what my job is. Be crystal clear about what my job is. Let me know what the mark is that is successful. Let me know the mark that is not successful. And Nick was really good at that. He let us know exactly what the expectation was.
Your time with the Saints, to me, I look at that team and just I think the role of the running back in my mind was like in the early 2000s was like you needed this running back. I feel like the running back then was what the wide receiver is now. Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
Oh, for sure. When you think back to the 80s and 90s, most of the big names are running backs and quarterbacks. But now you hear of 2 or 3 running backs, but after that, you might not even recognize who the running back for each of the teams are.
So, like, from my basketball background, when you looked at Michael Jordan, for example, Clyde Drexler was his direct competitor in my mind at the 2-guard position. When you were in the NFL, who was that guy that you like marked on the calendar like, I can't wait to go at him? Who do you feel was your direct competitor?
So for the running back position, because he was drafted 4 overall, I was drafted 5 overall. So we were compared through our whole careers. Was Edgerrin James. He was the main one. And then I think below him, other guys around my age, Fred Taylor, Tiki Barber, Curtis Martin, was kind of towards the end of his career, but he was still putting up big numbers.
When you went to the Dolphins for that second time in 2005, was it like deja vu?
It was different. It was different in so many ways. A lot of players were the same, but Coach Wanstead and before him was Jimmy Johnson. So there was kind of a feel around what it meant to be a Dolphin. And I think when they let him go and they brought in Nick Saban, it changed. So it was the same uniform, same color, a lot of the same people, but it was different. It was very different. And my role with the team was very different. I think before I retired, I was the offense. And when I came back, Nick drafted Ronnie Brown, drafted another running back with the number 1 pick. So it wasn't just on my shoulder. So a lot was the same, but it was very different in a lot of ways too.
In football, I feel like still there's this stigmatism about smoking weed. In a way that in the NBA, it's not. I've heard stories ad nauseum about Allen Iverson, showing up to a Sixers game, knocking down jumpers drunk.
Yeah.
Two-part question. At your position in the NFL, Could someone actually function better drinking or being high in a football game?
Yeah, it's a good question. In a lot of ways, I would say drinking because you don't care. Something about when you have a couple of drinks and you don't care. And that kind of attitude can get you far in football in general. But if you drink too much and you start to forget your assignment, I think that gets you in trouble. And that would be the issue with being high. As long as you have studied your assignment and you know exactly what you're doing, then when you're in the zone, you remember your assignment. I think if you don't study when you get in the zone, sometimes you forget stuff. So in general, I think drinking for football, but I think in all sports, there's something about being high that puts you into the zone, this area of creativity. And I think in football, creativity is a part of it, but you don't tend to think of that. You tend to think of blocking and tackling, and it's more regimented like the military. So I think that's where the stigma comes from in football more so than in basketball, where I don't know, I never played basketball, but I imagine you only got 5 guys on the court at one time, and one guy could take over the game. But in football, it's hard for one person to take over the game because even if it's the quarterback, he needs a receiver to catch the ball. And if it's a running back, we need the coach to call the play and we need the line to block for us. So that's my take, at least.
Tell me, so for those who are tardy to the party, you have entered the cannabis space. We talked about that out in Georgetown a few months ago. Tell us more about how you cornered the market.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is in cannabis, because still to this point, to really have a cannabis brand that's taken seriously, you had to be doing something before it became legal. And so that makes it tricky to have a brand. And I think where I cornered the market is when it comes to sports, athletes, and cannabis, I'm probably the person that's most known. And so I had a head start as far as people know my story. It's easy to make a connection between me and cannabis. Some other guys who have been consuming for a long time, but kept it under wraps, either they're not ready to come out publicly, or people just don't take them seriously. So I think where it comes to, I say sports and athletics, but the goal here really is about performance. And it's about, because in any substance, any drug or whatever, there's a range of experiences. There's people that abuse it, and we have a lot of those negative stereotypes. But the one thing that we don't talk about cannabis is people who go to the next level because of it. I think of artists, athletes who because of the altered state have the ability to take their mind and their bodies and their abilities to that next level. And that's the part of cannabis that I'm excited about promoting and getting out into the world. So we have a good start, but I think cornering the market will be, I'll recognize it because people will talk about cannabis differently. They'll talk about it in ways that it helped them get to that next level.
Do you regret, so for example, when you look at marijuana and how the government looks at it, how society looks at it, it's less taboo now than it was when you played. Do you ever wonder what your career would look like if you played in this era and marijuana was more accepted now?
I do that quite often, but also part of it for me is there wouldn't be the way it is right now, at least in sports and football, if it wasn't for me. And so hopefully, it would have been nice if someone would have come before me and made it a little bit easier. But I take pride in that I helped pry that door open and allow more players to have access to cannabis without being afraid of losing their career or their reputation.
So I remember when you were the 5th pick in the NFL draft in '99, and you, if I'm not mistaken, were on the cover of ESPN the Magazine.
I was on the cover of ESPN the Magazine with Coach Ditka. That was the image of me wearing the wedding dress. But it was all going around at the same time, so it was pretty clear to everyone that I had lost my mind. Yeah.
So to take a step back, that whole wedding dress thing, it gives me Dennis Rodman vibes. Whose idea was it?
The timing of it, it does reek of Dennis vibes. And about that time, I got to meet Dennis for the first time, and And especially at that time, Dennis was an icon. I met him at the Super Bowl right before I got drafted, and we were walking down Collins, and it was crazy. All of the people that wanted to get a piece of Dennis. So I will say I did love the fact that Dennis allowed his athletic ability to take him to other places, and he was known for his athletic ability, but known for more. So I did resonate with that. But the truth is, I'm really not out there like Dennis. You know, I'm out there compared to, you could say, the average football player, but I'm not out there like Dennis. The idea came from Dan Le Batard. So Dan Le Batard and I got really close. He did a story for me at the end of my collegiate career, and we just became friends. And he was writing at the time for ESPN the Magazine, and they said they wanted to put me on the cover, and we went back and forth for a couple of weeks about what the cover shoot should be. And one day Dan called and he said, well, the idea we came up with now is a wedding dress. And when he first said it, I didn't think about Dennis. I just laughed because I thought it was funny, and I thought that's an interesting way to portray the trade that Ditka initiated. So again, in the moment on the phone, it was funny. But when we showed up at the photo shoot and I was trying to put on a wedding dress, it started to dawn on me that, okay, this is kind of uncomfortable. And then after the photo shoot, we're in the limo going back to the Saints facility. It was me and Coach Ditka. And he's looked at me and he said, who the hell convinced you to put that wedding dress on? You know? And I kind of laughed and I realized, okay, this probably is not going to be received. It's not going to be as funny to people as it was to me when I first heard the idea.
Who in your family asked you first what the hell was wrong with you when they saw the actual cover?
Actually, you know, I had just won the Heisman Trophy and I just signed my first big contract. So nobody.
I knew where this was going.
Yeah, nobody said, nobody in my family. A couple people looked at me, so a couple of my teammates said, what were you thinking? And again, I think the mistake I made was I thought when I made it, it meant I could do what I wanted and people would get it. But it kind of became more the opposite.
No, I feel you on that. New Orleans is like the party city. If you're not talking Vegas, you're not talking LA, you're talking New Orleans. What was that scene like? Because that was during the time when Master P and No Limit and even Cash Money was taking over for the 99-2000. What was that whole scene like in New Orleans when you were drafted?
It was crazy because I signed with Master P before I got drafted. And then for me to get drafted to the team, to the place where he was from, and you know, his whole camp was just down the road in Baton Rouge. So it felt like family. It felt like I had a lot of support there. But it was a wild time because honestly, you know, my preference would have been to go somewhere like Green Bay or Cleveland, where the only thing I had to focus on was football. But New Orleans is a whole thing, and I have to be honest. Coming from California, it took me a minute to get used to being in the South. You know, especially New Orleans, the deep South. But it took me about a year to find my place. But once I did, I really loved it. I really enjoyed it, and I felt very much embraced by everybody there.
So I would imagine by the time you went to the Dolphins, technically the South, you were well acclimated from Cali to the South.
It's different though, right? Yeah. Maybe the Panhandle in Florida, northern, even up to Orlando is kind of the South. But something about Southern Florida, it's like a melting pot. You got people from all over the world, and there's so much diversity. So yeah, I was warmed up, but it's a different kind of diversity because in Miami you got Jamaicans, Haitians, you got a whole bunch of different types of people. New Orleans, it was kind of just black people and white people, and there's a history between them.
When you played in the Arena Football League, you played for the Toronto Argonauts?
Yeah, I played up in Canada, yeah.
What was the difference in, obviously besides being cold, what were the differences in culture from Canadian football to the NFL? I
mean, it's kind of all the jokes about Canadians are true. You know? At least my experience, they're just really laid back. It was like being on a sitcom growing up. Everybody was just nice. Everybody was cool. And part of the culture I appreciated was, even though it's only a couple of, like an hour and a half from Buffalo, it felt like America, but you could tell you're in a different country. And people didn't take football so seriously. I mean, even in the Canadian Football League, the way they have the schedule is guys can have full-time jobs and still be able to play in the league. So it kind of had the feel of college. Guys that were playing not so much for the money, but because they really loved what they were doing. And I think that my time in Toronto really helped me kind of reappreciate the game again. It was fun. I had a good time.
And then you went from there to Baltimore Ravens in 2011.
Yeah, my last year was in Baltimore.
What was the culture like in Baltimore?
Football wise, it's like no other. I mean, that's a football town. The fans love it. I mean, on Fridays, Purple Fridays, everybody's sporting their Ravens gear. But I will say, I think one of the most difficult things, and I'm guessing this is in any sport, but is changing teams late in your career. You know? Because it's like where you grow up, where everybody knows you. You know, there's benefit of the doubt, they get you. And when you take that to another team, it's like you have to start all over again to a certain extent. You have to rebuild that personal reputation. So that part was challenging being in Baltimore because everybody was used to me in Miami. But it was a great experience playing with Ed Reed and Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs and Haloti Nada. Just playing with really good football players. And again, being in that organization. The Ravens really do a good job of taking care of the players.
I often look at Ray Lewis and Kevin Garnett as probably two of the most intense athletes, period. And the two guys that you can impersonate like no other, and everybody has their version. I throw Doc Rivers into that cast as well. Does Ray Lewis off the field talk as intense as he does on?
No, he doesn't. It's almost like you can feel it warming up as the week progresses. You know, we get it on Tuesday or Wednesday. He's super chill every day. Intensity goes up a little bit. We get in the locker room before the game. You can feel it, and it builds up and it peaks during game time. Thank goodness. If you're on his team, at least.
No, I believe it. I believe that. Ricky Williams joining us on Scoopy Radio, talking all things career, cannabis, Ray Lewis, and everything in between. Where I've often posed this question with NBA guys, and I'll take that and raise that and ask you, where is some place to this day that if you travel, you still eat for free today?
There's a couple of spots in Miami, a couple of spots in New Orleans, and definitely some spots in Austin, Texas. But it's interesting. I mean, as a kid, I used to think fame lasts forever, but in real life, it's generational. You know, thank God for YouTube. Kids can go back and watch videos, but there's something about people watching you play in person that really, I think, affects fame. So there are a couple of places, but I find as I get older, those places become less and less.
Sure, and of course, you playing for the Longhorns. Kevin Durant, a notable alum of the Texas Longhorns. There's just such a history and such a reverence. I was going to say reveredness, a reverence for athletes that come out of there. What makes Texas Longhorn sports athletics at large special?
I mean, I think it's kind of like any big university. You know, there's something. People grow up rooting for a team. They go to that university, or their parents, or their grandparents, or their uncles, or their aunts, and traveling around the country. I was in Wyoming this past week, and all the Wyoming Cowboy stickers. You know, it's like there's something about colleges that they're part of the land, and I think people feel a very strong association and connection with them. I think a state like Texas, where people are so proud, and they love football. You add those two things together, they become really proud of their football. And when I was going through the recruiting process, the main thing that I was looking for was to go to a place that had a very rich football tradition, because I wanted to be a part of it. And if I was very successful, I imagined, I'd live forever. And they could tear it down one day, but I do have a statue in Austin, Texas at the university. So it seemed like at least that wish came true, of going to a place that I knew they would appreciate good football.
Ricky, we've all, not just we've all watched Reggie Bush go from being villainized because of getting his Heisman taken and getting it back, and the cult following that has come because NILs and all of that stuff is commonplace with football. And I think over time, people accept people for who they are and more. By the same token, I feel like you have always been misunderstood, but the real ones know who you are. Reggie Bush, of course, has done television. Is television something for you that you'd like to do more regularly?
I mean, I'd like to get the word out, but honestly, I don't really like television that much. You know, maybe in the future, but I don't know. I always found like on television, there's always an expectation to be a certain way. You know? But I mean, it's a great medium for getting the word out. I just think there's like a level of fakeness that comes along with television.
What if you could, Nas made a song called If I Ruled the World. If you ruled the world for a day or for a season of a show, what would a Ricky Williams experience look like either in television form with sports or elsewhere?
Well, it would really be an extension of I think the best of sports is you take people and you put them through some kind of training and you put them in a situation where they have to do something really difficult with other people. So it would be kind of an intensity thing. So much of the attitude in football is you don't really know who's inside someone until they're squeezed. And the thing that I loved the most about being a football player was watching my teammates do something they didn't think they could do, or even myself doing something I didn't think I could do. So if I ruled the world, it'd be intense, but people would have breakthroughs.
Black diamonds and pearls.
Exactly.
Brother, you answered all my questions, and I'm glad that we were able to do this again.
Yeah, this was cool. Yeah, let me know when you want to chop it up again. I'll be here.
You already know, brother. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, take care.
All right, man.